this is Peter Adkison. I'm here with Steve Connard. We co-direct the Chaldea series, and we're here to take a deeper delve into the role of the Egyptian god Set in our story, and his role within a larger picture of gods in Chaldea. Okay, so first of all, we want to open by talking about, like, why do we use real world gods in the first place? And we talked a lot, but this is a very conscious decision. We have we feel like we really wanted Chaldea to be accessible. Sometimes fantasy worlds are so weird, so different from what you'd expect, and so full of different races and creatures that you've never heard of. That it doesn't feel accessible. To us, a great story is about the characters and their stories and their arcs. And we think it's helpful to have the setting be familiar. And so we have, the Norse gods and the Egyptian gods and Chinese gods. We rely heavily, just like on real world mythologies, just like we rely on traditional fantasy monsters like orcs and giants and undead and races like elves and dwarves and so on.
Yeah, we covered this before where we talked about we wanted monsters from classic mythologies that everybody knew and would immediately understand, what a minotaur was, and ogres and trolls under bridges and things of this nature. We do have our classic Drazzledar, of course, but mainly we go with classic monsters, and the same thing with the gods. We like Thor and Zeus and Hera and all these classic gods. We'd also have our standalone gods that we made up, like Cordava,
Iltani, Ariadne. Well, yeah, we, meaning we, including Barbara.
My first look at mythology came with the AD&D deities and demigods. I read fantasy books before that. My father introduced me to Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I read Tarzan. I liked reading, but it was like when I got introduced to in high school to D&D. Our GM had the books, I didn't, and handed me the AD&D deities and demigods, and of course it was amazing. Like, all the gods were awesome. And of course, I always go back to the classic. I think it was first edition, because I like the Michael Moorcock elements in there, and Cthulhu. I think it was second edition. It was like there's Persona non grata. I was like, those got to go. But we still have the original deities.
Well, I still got mine. Yeah, with Cthulians and the Stormbringer and Elric and Fafhrd the Grey Mouser. It's awesome.
Well, and so we look at that as sort of our baseline for the gods that are in Chaldea. If it's in deities and demigods, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us.
Yeah, and we went beyond it too. I've enjoyed as I've learned that Mr. Ward did not get all the gods exactly according to mythologies. We've gone through and tweaked it a bit and added some of the other gods, some other mythologies. Like a pre-Islamic Arab polytheistic pantheon, for example, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and a lot of fun. One thing I think would be good to mention is that there's also sort of a line of what we don't use from real world religions, and that is we limit what we use to what most people would consider to be dead religions, religions that were followed thousands of years ago that not really anybody seriously follows these days, except maybe is in jest or something like that. Probably get in trouble there. So you will never. So any religion that is commonly or has widespread adherence today, we don't run into that. So you're not going to run into Jesus or Shiva or Buddha or any of these sorts of figures in our story. You can relax about that. And we also try to avoid words that are exclusively or primarily used in one of those religions. So like we don't use the word abbey because abbey is predominantly a Christian term, but we will use a term like temple because that is broadly used. Even though it is used today, it's used by a number of different religions. So it's kind of just a generic religious term. So we try to do that. I don't know, we always get it exactly right, but that's what we try to do.
So Peter, where are the gods from? Obviously, we've already mentioned in our prologue that the gods were created in the age of gods when they're given birth from the singularity of creation. It's important to note that our universe, our brand is called Chaldea, but there's also a single world called Chaldea. They're both two things, two different ideas. But so Chaldea is just one plane of thousands in the Pearl universe.
Yeah, that exactly right. And we and this whole idea of the age of gods being the new age, our cosmology, if you watched Prologos, we have this idea of evolving ages. I mean, it's not really, that's a classic idea, is that there's different ages. But we really hung our hat on that and identified what these ages were and what the themes were. And the new age, if you will, is the age of gods. And so gods are kind of a new thing in the Chaldea universe, in the Pearl universe. And I never liked the idea that the gods were old and like you can hardly remember them and all the cool stuff about the gods already happened. No. The Chaldea gods are young and they are
obnoxious, as you said.
Obnoxious. They are waxing in power. They're flexing their muscles. They're learning all about this primal energy. Go see Rules of Godship 101 in case you're curious. and out conquering planes and establishing their religions and fighting each other. And it's glorious. Yeah. So that's the age of gods. So within this cosmology, where do these gods come from? Well, as Steve mentioned, Chaldea is one plane out of thousands of planes. And with the primal order, of course, is our rule set. Gods have to rule planes to be considered full gods, lesser gods and greater gods and so on. And so within that context, what is a pantheon? So it fits nicely to think of a pantheon as a group of gods that are all kind of from 2 or 3 or more planes that are grouped together somewhere in the Pearl universe.
Right.
For example, where are the Norse gods from, Steve? I know you love talking about it. We all know
Norse is more than one. It's like 9 worlds. Obviously, the Asgard is where the gods are from, but they probably grew up and grew out of, evolved from Midgard and the elf versions of Niflheim and different planes like that. And that's where the Norse gods all come from, and they're somewhere out in there in the universe. Connected via, the astral plane, the ethereal planes, and, the outer planes. Similarly, the Greek gods are from, probably from Olympus. They probably all started out evolving together out of this sort of nucleus of primal energy, and then those gods grew out.
That's right. And the Egyptian gods are from a plane called the Nile. Hey, why not, right? We know the Nile River is a big part of Egyptian history and was really important in a lot of Egyptian religious rites and in who the gods were and so on. So there's a plane called the Nile, and there is the idea of Ma'at and Duat, the plane, the physical world and the underworld. So all of those planes are rooted in where the Egyptian gods come from, and all the different pantheons of gods come from different places.
A lot of the planes too is you have to wrap your head around the idea that not all planes are just round spherical worlds like Earth. The Nile is this concept, this never-ending river that goes forever, and the sun, the Ra is the sun god. Is the sun actually a ball of nuclear energy floating through space? Probably not.
Well, and this also is kind of like how we reconcile the idea that you might have different gods claiming very similar spheres of influence. So Ra is the Egyptian god of the sun. Other pantheons have their gods of the sun. And on the plane of Chaldea, within this Pearl universe, there's an Endymion called Sun, which probably doesn't really take kindly to, if Ra comes by and tries to meddle with things, probably isn't too happy about that. So, but these are, it's not that there's just one sun in the universe, there's different suns at different planes, and so it all works out. Yes, so on this topic of like the age of gods, when are the gods? When is our story taking place relative to these real world mythologies, to the extent that we're bringing in elements of the real world mythologies. Well, I like to say it's like right in the middle. I mean, it's like right as things are happening. It's not late in the story. Ragnarok hasn't happened yet. But like, say, an Egyptian gods scenario for us, the war between Isis and Set is hot and heavy, because Set has, in the real world mythology, Set at one point in time killed Osiris. So in our world, that's just happened not too long ago. Set killed Osiris, chopped him up in a bunch of different pieces, hit him around the universe, and Isis is determined to get them back, and resurrect them. So right now in Chaldea history, Osiris is dead. We're right in that sliver of time in mythology. And of course, we reserve the right to change the ending.
Well, and if you ask around within the Maya churches, there are people actively questing to find parts of his body. That actually might show up in the story.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, maybe. Funny, we should mention that. The other thing is that some of the evil gods are sort of on the out, right? And so we're also in that part, because Set has killed Osiris. Set has fallen from grace, if you will, in his rivalry against Ra, and is a sort of persona non grata back in the home plains of the Egyptian gods. Back in the Nile, he's not really well liked at this point, and but he has some allies within the Egyptian pantheon. And he's gone out and made some friends with other gods that are not quite doing so well in their pantheons, like Ishtar, who isn't getting on the best of terms with Anu back in the Babylonian mythologies, and maybe Loki, who, of course, we all know, especially since Marvel movies have made him so big. Loki's has all these problems with the Norse gods.
This is where the original mythologies sort of break apart from the way they were traditionally were. So all the Norse gods, there's no stories in the Poetic Eddas about going out and meeting Zeus or going out and meeting Ra. These other pantheons didn't actually exist within their paradigm. Within Chaldea, the gods are aware of the other pantheons. And as you just stated, those that are like-minded, Loki and Set, the things they like to do are in alignment, and they might come together. Ishtar, gods of war, if you will. For example, Set is the supreme deity of evil in Chaldea, and that is sort of it's not really a sphere of influence so much as it is as a political position. So a lot of the quote evil gods of the dead, and maybe like Hel from Norse mythology, is in alignment with Set in this regard. And there's a supreme deity of evil, there's a supreme deity of good, and that's a political position that brings them a lot of clout and power and allows them to do a lot of things.
Okay, so given that the gods of different pantheons are in different places, how does the plane of Chaldea, as just one plane within a plural universe, how does it fit into this? Well, it doesn't. I mean, it is not part of any of these pantheons. It is a plane that doesn't have any history, at least not that is generally known, that relates to some pantheon or another. And other gods are aware of Chaldea, and they want planes because planes give them power. But there's a little bit of a problem between like just jumping down to Chaldea and taking it over. And that problem is called elder dragons. So elder dragons are pretty tough, and people from other planes who are in the know, gods that travel the universe and stuff, know that Chaldea is where the elder dragons come from, and not such an easy plane to take. And even though a lot of the elder dragons have maybe kind of gotten ambivalent or gone off to other worlds, there are still elder dragons in Chaldea who don't really want to see anybody controlling it.
Chaldea is unique also because it's linked to nearby other planes. So we talk about the Anumians in the sky, the constellations. That's the plane of On, A-N, the plane of On. And it sort of parallels the Great Sea. And that's a plane unto itself, but there's a bunch of Anumian spirits there I don't think any god would could just show up and take over that without running into whatever those spirits. I don't know what they would say about it, but I'm sure they wouldn't like it.
Well,
And
we
Chaldea
actually
is
have
sort
in
of-
one of our fake cards a story about a god who showed up and tried to kick butt on one of the Inumians and instead got themselves kicked their butt.
Well, yeah, because the gods is part of an age, but another age that's in its prime right now is the age of magic, and the age of magic is what powering the Inumians. So now you've got this conflict of powers between the age of magic and the age of gods, and who's more powerful. Well, the age of magic is more powerful as an age. So yeah, you're a god, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be able to take out, some entity of magic.
Yep, that's right. And so, and there are some other things about Chaldea Plain that pose challenges to any god who might think that it would be an easy plane to conquer. There is the Veil in Somarria, which is this dimensional rift, that planar rift that goes to the chaos planes of the Pearl universe. Not always attractive to be connected directly to the planar, to the chaos planes.
It's sort of it's sort of like your back door is permanently open to your house, right, and anything can wander in. Cordova is constantly dealing with things wandering in from the higher planes of chaos into Somaria. Yeah. I think you were just about ready to hint. There's also the Garnon Forest, which has a unique link.
Yeah. What'd you say? You described the Garnon Forest as a place. Like the Millennium Falcon. It's a lot bigger on the inside than it looks from the outside. Yeah, it's just one little forest on our map, but it's got all these extra dimensional things. It's where the world tree connects to Chaldea is in the Garnon Forest. In fact, there's one place you can go and you can see a root of the world tree that sticks up kind of like that famous arch. And
we'll point right there. We'll put up the a piece of art.
There it is.
So it's kind of interesting to know. We talked about in our prologue how the world tree, the universe tree, permeates all of existence. Its branches go up into the universe, and its roots go down, and it fuels all these different worlds. Well, the roots and the branches and the leaves, everything actually physically touch all these different planes. And where one of those roots touches Chaldea, that root is exposed, and you can actually see it. If you go to the city of Tartu, you can see it there. And there's people who believe that root that's touching that part is what powers and fuels the Garnon Forest.
This is an explanation of why Chaldea is not part of a pantheon and is also hasn't been taken over by some god. I mean, unless you count Cordova, of course, in sort of recent history, but also why it's on the radar of some gods. And before Cordova came along, there were a number of religions. You can imagine that while the gods may not be trying to take over Chaldea, they would at least like some missionaries down there to, try and collect a few points of primal from people. Also, if you remember your history from Prologos, and during the Clawhammer War, the dragons waged war against the dwarves by bringing peoples from all over the Pearl universe, from different planes to Chaldea. And so the humans that they brought from various cultures brought their religions with them. So the Ma'at people from the Nile brought with them the worship of the Egyptian gods, and the people that came from Mad Mel brought the worship of the Celtic gods, and so on and so forth and so forth. So a lot of gods have had worshipers to them on Chaldea Prime, but it's also another obstacle that some deity might have in taking over Chaldea is that you'd have a lot of people worshiping other religions that they'd have to deal with, which of course Cordova.
Yeah, it is the melting pot.
Yeah.
The thing about gods taking over these different planes, Set and Cordova taking over, is sort of like, the mafia trying to control, say, I don't know, gangs of New York or something, where every other street is a different gang. And sure, everybody'd like to control the entire city, but controlling the entire city is very, very difficult. And controlling Chaldea has turned out to be very difficult. I mean, Cordova tried to control it, did for 40 years, and then suddenly was it.
Well, let's talk about Cordova. Yes, indeed. So we've explained what all the obstacles would be and how difficult it would be to take Chaldea, and some of the challenges that might come with that task. Yet, it happens in our story. So as Credava rises to power, as we discussed at length in a prior video, recommend the deeper delve into Emperor Credava, is Credava raised in power with his good friend Holsan, who was a priest of Set. Holsan advanced enough in the church and was aware of sort of what was happening in the rest of the cosmos to a varying extent. A very, very shrewd person. He connected the dots and started to build a relationship with the broader church of Set, people outside Chaldea, demigods of Set, demigods of Set, and ultimately Set himself, with the idea that there's the possibility of a play here where Set could support this guy Credava, who just seemed unstoppable, and supporting him in the right way at the right time could bring Chaldea into the fold of Set.
Yeah, you need to jump on that Credava bandwagon, which he did. And I mean, the thing is, these pantheons are built like a pyramid scheme. We've talked about this before in the Primal Order.
Especially the Egyptian pantheons are built like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, so I mean, Set sure would love to control the plane himself and control 50, 60, or 100, however many planes. But, you know, if he has a supported demigod underneath him and that guy's controlling the plane, it's, yeah, good enough. It's all in the family. It's in the pyramid.
Right, exactly. So a key to this plan that Holsan hatches with Credava and with the Church of Set is the Kingdom of Shemau. The Kingdom of Shemau is inhabited by the survivors and descendants of the Ma'at people from the Nile, worshippers of the Egyptian gods who immigrated forcibly to Chaldea 1,000 years ago during the Clawhammer War. And after that war was over, you had different people of different pockets of ethnicity all over Chaldea, and there was what's called the Great Diaspora. And when the shakeout was over, there was a large community of the Ma'at in this place called they called Shemau. And so he gets sort of extra support from Set to create a general sense of apostasy within Shemau. They worked sort of double down the efforts of increasing the prestige of Set in that kingdom, and basically went to war with the followers of the other gods of the Nile.
Yeah. So within the pantheon, currently in our current story, there's a civil war in the Ma'at pantheon, and it's filtered down to all the little conclaves that are out there in the universe, including Shemau and Chaldea, and it comes to a head in the Zane chapter,
yes.
In the city of Dorsang.
Yes. So as Credava runs amok across Chaldea, conquering everything in his path, forming a unified unified government, and manages to even bring the dragons in line, and supports Holsan's religious war in Shemau, driving the other forces of the other religions, defeating them, and elevating the Church of Set in Shemau. Holsan brokers the final deal between Credava and Set, and during Credava's ascension, Set ascends Credava to be a demigod of Set. And in exchange, there's a little trick, there's a little catch. The little catch is that Credava now needs to outlaw all other religions pretty much everywhere else in Chaldea.
Yeah, you can't be a god and just have religions everywhere else. It's like, especially if it's your home, it just doesn't work that way. This is blasphemy. Well, see, even Marco, he's been like, yeah, this is blasphemy. This would not happen. Well, I think he thinks more like we shouldn't print this. You might actually believe it, but it's like we should not print this.
Right.
The church said will not be appreciative of us just putting that on the front cover of our newspaper. We may not be in business next week.
Well, and this will be a common refrain. I mean, people who are devout to Set, and of course, most people are religious, and that has been the only religion available. Most people in Chaldea are devout and will consider any accusation that Set might have had a hand on his spear when it went into Granava's chest, that's blasphemy. But fortunately, there will be other possible causes that will reveal themselves, or we will reveal them to you in time. So there you have it. That is a bit more about who is Set. In case you were wondering, is Set the only god in Chaldea? No. Set is not the only god in Chaldea. He has just been pretending to be the only god in Chaldea. And now that the Emperor Granava is dead, and a lot of people are starting to go, Emperor Granava is dead. He's the one that made up this rule. 40 years wasn't long enough to kill off all the people who worship gods other than Set. And so now there might be some opportunity for some of these dead religions, even to those semi-gods.
Did you just invoke the semi-gods?
Oh my gosh, the semi-gods. Okay, we guys saw that. Okay, so back in classic Chaldea, there were certain PCs there were two PCs in particular who had not been ascended into demigod status back when we were kind of going through the transition where a lot of the player characters were becoming gods. And since they weren't demigods, they started calling themselves semi-gods. So there you have it. The last missing piece of the whole topic about gods in Chaldea, semi-gods. Yeah. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion about Set and the gods of Chaldea, where Set fits in, where the other gods fit in, and all, and some of the mischief that might happen here in future part of our story.
Just remember, nature abhors a vacuum.
That's right.
And God's primal, they abhors a vacuum more.
And so do people on spaceships. Sorry, I've been watching too much Expanse.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you for watching our video.
The Emperor! He's dead!
Found dead in the throne room.
Better that than the toilet room, but who cares? He's dead. The universe is obviously telling us one thing. Pub crawl!
We're so wasted.